Well, this morning's message is about running to win. And there's a famous athlete. His name was Eric Liddell. He was a British Olympic athlete, and he competed in the 1924 Olympic Games held in Paris. Now, you might think that an athlete of this caliber, there's lots of them we've seen over the years. Since 1924, there's been lots of Olympic events. But Eric Liddell was special because he was a Christian. And he decided that he would not run a 100-meter race because it was being held on a Sunday. Now, what's special about that? Well, first of all, Eric was specialized in the 100-meter relay, or 100-meter dash. This was his thing that he did. This was his skill set. And not to mention, it would cost the British gold medals in the events. But he decided that he was not going to run. And so later, after the Olympics were over, he felt called to go in missions to China. Well, that was about 1930s, mid-1930s or so. Eric went to go to China to be a missionary, to be a teacher there. Well, during that time, World War II started to break out in 1939. Germany invaded Poland, and then the Japanese started to invade mainland China. Well, Eric sent his family to go to Canada while he stayed behind, even though his family was urged to leave China and get out of there. But Eric stayed behind. Eventually, the Japanese arrived to the space where he was at, and they took him to an internment camp where he spent the rest of his days. But during his time in the internment camp, he was ministering to the people there. He never said anything bad about any of the guards. He never showed any chink in his armor. In fact, one of the prisoners that was there said that when he died, he left a void in that camp. Eric was quoted as saying this: "It's been a wonderful experience to compete in the Olympic Games and to bring home a gold medal. But since I was a young lad, I've had my eyes on a different prize. You see, each of us are in a greater race than any of I have run in Paris. And this race ends when God gives out the medals." So each of us are running a race today, and Eric knew that not only did it take discipline to run in the Olympics because he had to train to run. Even though God had gifted him to run, he had to train to run. And Eric also knew that he had to train and work to get the prize that God was going to give to us. So if you have your Bibles, let's open up to 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Verse 24 through 27, and it says this: "Do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize." Now, as you know, that when I preach, I like to give a little bit of context to the scripture I'm preaching on. So this letter was written during Paul's second missionary journey, which is around 1950 AD. And this is supposedly his first journey to that region. But actually, this is one of 3 letters that Paul has written to the Corinthians. We have not discovered the first letter, but to read 1 Corinthians, you're actually reading 2 Corinthians, and 2 Corinthians is 3 Corinthians. And so that's kind of an interesting tidbit of information. But he's writing to these churches, and he's written 2 letters to the Corinthians. And so as you might wonder, or might gather, these churches in Corinth are having some problems. They're like the problem children of Paul's day, the churches that he's writing to. So they're having a little bit of problems with things. And so to kind of answer that question and try to look at that a little bit better is, where is Corinth located? It's located on an isthmus in Greece, located somewhere in the south. And the way that Corinth was located at that time was between 2 major bays. And so we'd have people that were landing on each bay not wanting to travel around the big piece of land that would get to the other bay. And so they would come across that bay, that isthmus, and they would come to Corinth to trade their wares and distribute them amongst the Greece. Now that brought in a lot of culture, that brought in a lot of different religions, a lot of different things came to that town. And so you can imagine as a baby church growing up in Corinth, that they had all these different religions, all these different ideas, all these different things happening in Corinth. And so not only they're baby Christians trying to discover and get their feet under them, but now they've got to contend with all these different ideas that are coming into them as well. And so Paul is writing here about the games. Now, what's important about the games here is that located about 40 miles to the north is what they call the Isthmian Games. This is kind of with the comparable comparison to the Olympic Games, which is located in Olympia, which is about 120 miles to the southeast of Corinth. And the people in Corinth would know these games very well. I'm sure that not only did they probably celebrate this and they go to these games, but they probably knew a lot of the athletes that competed in these games. And to be an athlete in these games was very prestigious. It was if you won these games, you were honored in society. You're almost like a celebrity, a hero. And so they knew all about these games. In fact, I'm pretty sure that Paul was probably not an athlete, but he probably was a very big fan of the games too. But see, so Paul uses this athletic analogy because this is what the people knew in that region. They knew all about the games. See, the Olympic Games happened every 4 years, but the Isthmian Games, which was much closer to them, happened every 2. Now, the people who won got a crown. This was their prize. When Paul talks about a prize that's perishable, this is what he's talking about. Now, this is what they gave to the victors in the Isthmian Games was dried wild celery. Yeah, so they put a piece of salad on their heads. You know, they might have even given them a chalice of ranch next to them and said, "Here, just dip that in there." But this was what they received. This is not an actual wreath from the games, obviously. This is just maybe a representation of what it might look like. But this is the crown that they got. But every athlete that goes into these games had to have a goal. And that's my first point, is to walk the Christian faith, to run this race that we're on today, we have to have a goal. As we go into any kind of training in life, whether it's with a job or schooling or even going to the gym, we have to have a goal. See, without a goal, you're kind of running aimlessly, as Paul talks about. You don't have a plan. But goal helps us to focus on a future point in our lives so that when we get distracted or when we run into barriers in life, we have that goal looking out there that we can look at and say, I need to get to that goal. It helps move us towards a certain thing in life that we need to accomplish. And Paul says in here that we need to run each race to get a prize. Now, Paul could have been saying, hey, just run this race, and that's good. You know, just go out there and start running. You're good. But in order to run the race, you need to have a goal. Like someone just gets off the couch one day and says, I'm going to run a marathon. No, you have to have a goal. You have to have an idea of what that means for you. You don't go to schooling and say, I'm going to be a doctor one day. You have to have a goal. You have to have something that's going to propel you towards that goal. And so we need this prize. And so Paul says, you're running to get a prize. You're not just running to run, because running to run's not all that fun. You need to have a goal. You need weight loss as a goal, or you need to be healthier or whatever. So you need to have a goal. So we push forward. You might ask yourself, you know, I know we know that athletes run for a prize. They run for glory. They run for a gold medal. They run for, you know, prize money or whatever it may be. But what is our goal as Christians? You know, what is our goal that we're running towards? And a lot of the first blush answers that you might think of is, well, we're running for heaven, right? Running to get to heaven. Well, I'd like to argue that the fact that that's not really what we're running for. What do I say that? Well, when we became believers in Jesus, heaven was the gift that was given to us by grace. It was not earned by us. There's nothing that we can do to earn heaven. There's nothing that we can accomplish on this planet that will ever get us into heaven. It's by the blood of Jesus Christ that we get to heaven. It's a gift to us. It's already been given to you. It's not a prize to be won. So what is the prize? Well, Paul talks about it here in a few verses earlier. In verse 19, chapter 9, verse 19, he says, "Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. To the Jews I have become like a Jew, to win the Jews. To those under the law I have become like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, as to win those under the law. To those who have not having the law I have become like one not having the law, though I am not free from the God's law, but I am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I have become weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings." And I think Paul points to the very fact here that he's not running to win heaven, he's running to win souls. He's become to all people all things so that he might win people for Christ. Now, what does that look like for us? It means that, what does it mean? What does that look like for us going forward? What does that mean for us as we get the prize? I think that means that one day we will go before God and he will make an account of our lives. And he'll ask, what have you done with your life? Will you hear, "Good and faithful servant, well done"? And I think that the prize that Paul is talking about is the glory of Christ, is the praise that Jesus gives to us when we get to heaven, is the "well done and good and faithful servant" that we're going to be hearing one day. And will we hear that? So I think that Paul bringing as many people to Christ is his way of seeking the prize. So we know that we have a goal. So what do we do after we know that we have a goal? Let's say we're going to the gym and we're going to start working out and gaining muscle and losing weight. We have the goal, we have the vision of what we're going to look like, So what do we do now? Well, point number 2 says we discipline ourselves. And Paul's very, very blunt about this in his passage here. He says in verse 25, anyone who competes athletically goes into strict training. And then he goes on in verse 27, he says he makes his own body his slave, that it will do what he wants it to do, not what it wants it to do. Talking about Olympic athletes and how Paul references these athletes in the scriptures. Do you know that an Olympic athlete that competes in today's games starts very young? Let's say you're going into gymnastics, you have to start around 4 or 5 to start training for the Olympics. If you're doing any other sport, it's about around age 11. Now you might think, well, that's not too bad. Just 2 or 3 days in the gym, a little training here and there. No, this is very intensive training. This is say goodbye to your childhood. Say goodbye to family dinners and holidays. You miss out on a lot of the childhood things that you would usually do, like play with your friends at the park or whatever. It's an all-in scenario. They devote their entire lives to training for the Olympic Games. And just to give you a little bit of context, about 10,000 athletes on average compete in the Olympic Games every year. 1/3 of those bring home gold medals. So it's very competitive. And you may be all in just to win nothing at all. So they discipline themselves. They say no to things that they want to say yes to. So saying no to saying yes means that we're saying no to things now in our lives that we want to say yes to in the future. All athletes that compete for the games, all athletes in general, usually have to say no to a lot of things in their lives. It's say no to ice cream and cheeseburgers and pizza and all the things that are going to weigh them down physically. They have to say no to sitting on the couch and binge watching The Crown or whatever it is that you watch. They have to say no to these things so they can spend time in the gym. They can spend time in specialized training for the Olympic events. And so saying no to this now means saying yes to maybe a gold medal in the future. So what are we saying no to now that we want to say yes to in the future as Christians? What does that look like for you? Does it mean giving up some movies that you might think are questionable? Does that mean giving up some material reading? Does it mean giving up some people you hang out with on a daily basis? What does that mean for us today? Saying no to things today that maybe we can say yes to Jesus Christ. We can say yes to the things that matter for heaven so that we can say yes to Jesus. So now that we have disciplined ourselves and that we thought about discipline and what it means for us to put ourselves through the training to run this race, this Christian race that we've run so far. Point 3 takes me to the point, last point here. We need to take this race seriously. All athletes that train for the Olympic Games, they take it very seriously. Obviously, at age 4, you're taking it very seriously. You're saying no to a lot of things. So you're taking it very seriously. So it could be easy just to say, I'm a Christian. I don't need to do any extra stuff. I have my fire insurance card in my back pocket. I don't really need to do much more for Jesus. But Paul makes it very clear in the end of this passage here. He says, I do not strike my body. I strike my body to blow to my body and make it my slave, so after I have preached to others, I myself might not be disqualified for the prize. See, Paul was worried about disqualification. And how does that tie into being serious about our walk? Well, see, even Paul has worries that he might be doing something on the side that might be disqualifying him from service. A lot of, as I was preparing for this message, a lot of scholars and a lot of theologians have debated what Paul really means by disqualification. A lot of the scholars have said maybe, it's about losing your salvation, that maybe there's a point in time in your life where you could possibly lose your salvation. Some other scholars have surmised that it could be the fact that you've never were saved. Maybe you're doing things in your life point to the fact that, you never were saved in the first place. Others say that the fact that Paul's talking about here is disqualification is about being disqualified for the service that God has for us today. So what does that mean? Well, it means doing things in our lives that might disqualify us from, say, preaching to somebody on the street or providing service to God. And I think that's what Paul is talking about here. In 2 Corinthians 13:5, Paul talks about examining yourself. He talks about examining yourself. So when we talk about disqualification, he's saying, test yourself. Are you in the faith or are you not in the faith? Are you walking with Jesus or are you not walking with Jesus? What are we doing in our lives today that are pointing us to Jesus? And if these things are not in our lives, we should think about that. So why do you think we not take this race seriously in our lives? What is it that's pushing us away from taking this seriously? Are the things in life crowding into our lives that are causing us to really rethink our Christian walk? Are there things in our lives that we need to jettison? And what's at stake? It's our walk with Jesus is at stake. It's our ministry to others. It's how we present ourselves to others is at stake today. So as the praise team comes forward, I just want to close with one little thing here. And I just want to challenge you, don't quit this race. The race is hard. Most athletes will tell you that running a marathon is not easy. Getting into the gym and working out is not easy. It's sweaty, it's painful, it's difficult. It takes a lot of time out of your day. It's not an easy thing to do. And it's easy to quit. So I just want to challenge you, don't quit today. Keep on the good race. Fight the good fight today. And I wanted to just say that hopefully every one of us will hear a good and faithful servant when we go home to be with Jesus.